Lucas Bennett's low, restrained cries echoed at the empty bus stop on Fifth Avenue in Seattle. His shoulders shook as he tried unsuccessfully to hold back the tears that streamed down his freckled face. The October night sky covered the city with a fine drizzle typical of the Pacific Northwest as Officer Michael Rodriguez made his routine rounds. Michael was not the type to ignore the suffering of others. In his 15 years on the force, he had developed a sixth sense for distinguishing a simple teenage tantrum from something truly disturbing. When he saw that boy sobbing alone at 9:43 p.m., his instincts sounded all the alarms. "Hey, buddy, everything okay?" Michael asked, parking his car next to the stop. The boy immediately tried to hide his face with the sleeves of his navy blue sweatshirt, which was too big for his small body. "Yes, sir, I'm just waiting for the bus," Lucas replied in a choked voice. Michael checked his watch and frowned. The last bus on this line passed 40 minutes ago. He watched the boy cringe even more. "What's your name? Where do you live?" "Lucas Bennett. I live with my Aunt Claire on Roosevelt Avenue," he answered hesitantly. Officer Rodriguez knew the area well. It was on the other side of the city. "What are you doing so far from home at this hour, Lucas?" That's when the floodgates opened. Between sobs, Lucas began to speak the words coming out like a long-dammed torrent. "I can't keep it in any longer, sir. 3 years ago I saw something terrible happen right around the corner." Michael sat down next to the boy, sensing that he was about to hear something important. The cold autumn wind blew between the buildings, carrying dry leaves and scraps of paper. "It was a night like this. I was coming home from baseball practice with my dad," Lucas continued, his voice shaking. "We saw when that black car, a new Mercedes, hit a woman and her little daughter who were crossing the street. It didn't even stop, it just sped off and disappeared into the night." Officer Rodriguez felt his heart squeeze. He remembered that case, Amanda Wilson, 32, and her daughter Sophie, just 6 years old, killed in a hit-and-run accident. The case had been dismissed for lack of conclusive evidence. "Why didn't you say anything before, Lucas?" The boy hugged his knees. "My father. He recognized the driver. It was Robert Callahan, the owner of Callahan Enterprises. The next day he showed up at our house." Lucas paused, his hands shaking. "He offered money for our silence, a lot of money. My father was unemployed. We were behind on our bills." Michael felt his blood boil. Robert Callahan was a well-known name in Seattle, a respected businessman who had built an empire in the real estate sector. His donations to charities always made headlines in the local papers. "What's changed? Why did you decide to talk now?" "My father died last month. Cancer." Lucas wiped his tears away with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "For the last few weeks he kept talking about that night. He said the money was suffocating him, that he couldn't sleep. Before he died, he made me promise to tell him the truth." Officer Rodriguez put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "You're doing the right thing, Lucas. I need you to come with me to the police station and tell all this officially. Can you do that?" Lucas nodded, determined, despite the fear evident in his eyes. "Those people, they deserve justice, don't they?" On the way to the police station, Michael reflected on how a moment of greed could trigger such a profound tragedy. The Wilson case had haunted the department for years, a dead mother and daughter, no witnesses willing to talk, insufficient evidence. At the police station, Detective Rachel Morrison from the Homicide Division listened to Lucas's testimony with professional attention, but Michael could see the emotion in her eyes. The boy described every detail of that fateful night with astonishing clarity: the sound of the impact, the screams, the partial license plate of the vehicle, even the country club sticker on the rear windshield. "Lucas," Rachel said gently after finishing her statement, "do you know that this could become something big? Robert Callahan is a powerful man with a lot of resources." "I know," Lucas replied, his voice small but firm. "But my father used to say that sometimes we need to face our fears in order to do the right thing." Michael watched as Rachel made the necessary calls to reopen the case. Within hours, a covert operation was taking shape. Teams had been deployed to investigate other suspicious accidents involving luxury vehicles in recent years. "I'm taking you home now," Michael told Lucas. "Your aunt must be worried." On the way to Roosevelt Avenue, Lucas looked lighter, as if he had left a huge weight behind. "Officer Rodriguez," he said softly, "do you think they know Amanda? And Sophie Wilson? Do you think they know we're trying to get justice?" Michael looked at the boy through the rearview mirror, admiring his courage. "I'm sure they do, Lucas, and I'm sure your father is proud of you now, too." Leaving Lucas at home, Michael knew that this night marked only the beginning of a complex investigation. Robert Callahan wouldn't go down easily, but the truth had a peculiar way of finding its way into the light even after years of darkness. The rain had stopped when Michael returned to the police station. Rachel was waiting for him with a thick folder on her desk. "You won't believe what we found," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "It seems that our model businessman has an interesting history of settling accidents with private settlements." Michael sat down, preparing himself for a long night. The courageous testimony of a 12-year-old boy was about to trigger an investigation that would shake the power structures in Seattle, and he was determined to see it through to the end. Detective Rachel Morrison didn't sleep that night. The folders scattered on her desk formed a mosaic of tragedies connected by one name, Robert Callahan. Each file revealed a disturbing pattern of accidents, solved with generous financial settlements and carefully manipulated documents. "I found 3 more suspicious cases between 2015 and 2019, Rachel told Officer Rodriguez, who was returning with 2 coffees. "They all follow the same pattern: hit and runs by luxury vehicles, witnesses who mysteriously changed their testimony, families who suddenly gave up suing." Michael absorbed the information as he looked at the photos of the victims. How did he get away with it for so long? "Money and influence," Rachel replied, running a hand through her brown hair. In frustration, "Callahan Enterprises is one of Seattle's largest employers. He has connections in the legal department at City Hall, even in the police department," Michael added, his expression hardening. "We need to put together a team we can fully trust." Meanwhile, at the Callahan Mansion on Mercer Island, Robert Callahan was finishing his morning exercise routine when his lawyer, Marcus Fleming, burst into his private office. "We have a problem," Fleming declared, his normally impassive face betraying concern. "The Wilson case has been reopened. A witness has come forward." Callahan froze for a moment but soon regained his composure. "Impossible. We bought everyone's silence that night. It's James Bennett's son," Fleming explained, handing over a preliminary report. "His father recently died of cancer. The boy went to the police last night." "A 12-year-old," Callahan laughed, but there was a tremor in his voice. "So what? It's his word against my reputation." "It's not that simple. Detective Morrison is investigating other incidents." She started connecting the dots. At the police station, Rachel and Michael were putting together an investigative picture, linking apparently isolated events with red lines that always converged on Callahan. The detective placed the businessman's photo in the center. "We need to protect Lucas," Michael said, remembering the fear in the boy's eyes. "If Callahan finds out that he's our star witness—" "I've already arranged it," Rachel interrupted. "I've placed a discreet vehicle near his aunt's house and assigned 2 plainclothes policemen to escort him to school." Rachel's phone rang. It was Karen Wilson, Amanda Wilson's sister. After 3 years, she had never given up hope that the truth about the death of her sister and niece would come out. "Detective Morrison," Karen said, her voice shaking, "I just got an anonymous call. Someone offering me $500,000 to convince you not to reopen the case." Rachel exchanged meaningful glances with Michael. "Ms. Wilson, I need you to come to the police station immediately. I'll send a car to pick you up." On Roosevelt Avenue, Lucas tried to keep to his normal routine, but the weight of what he had revealed stayed with him. During his break at school, he noticed a black car stopped across the street. His heart raced until he recognized the plainclothes police officers that Officer Rodriguez had promised. Claire Bennett. His aunt watched her nephew with concern. Since she had taken custody of him after his brother's death, she had never seen him so upset. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Lucas? Dad always said that the truth is like water, Aunt Claire," Lucas replied, playing with his untouched cereal. "No matter how many barriers you put up, it always finds a way." At the Callahan mansion, Robert was typing furiously on his computer when his 16-year-old daughter Melissa entered the office. "Dad, is everything all right? You look not—" "Now, darling," he cut in sharply. Melissa stepped back, but not before noticing her father rapidly deleting files. Rachel and Michael spent the next day interviewing former employees of Callahan Enterprises. Most refused to talk, but one former, Secretary Janet Cooper, finally broke the silence. "He had a system," Janet revealed in a discreet coffee shop away from the center. "Whenever there was an accident, Mr. Fleming would activate a specific team. They would clean up everything: evidence, witnesses, documents." "I need names," Rachel insisted gently. Janet hesitated, her hands shaking as she gripped her coffee cup. "You don't understand. These people, they're not just employees. They're powerful people in important positions. That's why we need to put an end to this," Michael argued. "How many other families have been silenced? How many other Amanda and Sophie Wilsons are there?" The names of the victims seemed to touch something in Janet. She grabbed a napkin and began to write. "Some of them still work for Callahan. Others have been promoted to public positions. This one," she pointed to a name, "is a judge now." Meanwhile, at Lucas's school, a substitute teacher caught his eye after class. "Your parents must be proud of your grades," he commented casually. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Something was wrong. Everyone at school knew about his father. Before he could react, he saw the undercover officer appear in the doorway. "Lucas, your aunt is waiting," the officer said firmly, his gaze fixed on the substitute teacher. Back at the police station, Rachel received a disturbing call. The body of Marcus Fleming, Callahan's lawyer, had been found in his car, apparently the victim of a heart attack. "Too convenient," she muttered to Michael. Fleming was the only one who knew all the details of the deals. "It's getting more dangerous," Michael observed. "Callahan is eliminating loose ends." Rachel looked at the photo of Amanda and Sophie Wilson on her desk. "Then we need to act fast. Tomorrow we'll execute the search warrants. Every minute counts now." Night fell over Seattle, but the lights in the investigation room remained on. Somewhere in the city, Robert Callahan was making desperate phone calls trying to keep his empire of lies afloat. And in a room on Roosevelt Avenue, Lucas Bennett stared out the window, praying for the same courage his father always said he had. The truth was finally emerging, but the price for justice was yet to be fully revealed. District Attorney James Hartford's office was a monument to authority with its mahogany-paneled walls and framed certificates. That morning he watched Detective Rachel Morrison and Officer Michael Rodriguez with a mixture of skepticism and concern. "Do you realize the magnitude of what you're proposing?" Hartford adjusted his gold-framed glasses. "Robert Callahan is not just another businessman. He practically built half of Seattle and destroyed several lives in the process," Rachel replied, placing a folder with photos of the victims on the table. "We have solid evidence linking him to at least 5 fatal hit and runs in recent years." Hartford leafed through the material in silence, his face hardening with each page. The suspicious death of Marcus Fleming, the veiled threats to the Wilson family, Janet Cooper's statements, everything pointed to an elaborate conspiracy that extended far beyond simple traffic accidents. Meanwhile, at Callahan Enterprises, Melissa was secretly rummaging through her father's computer. The teenager had never questioned the origin of the family fortune, but the news about the reopening of the Wilson case and her father's erratic behavior in recent weeks had piqued her curiosity. "Oh my God!" she muttered when she found an encrypted folder containing records of suspicious payments. The names of judges, police officers, and civil servants appeared next to large sums of money. On Roosevelt Avenue, Lucas was getting ready for another day at school when he noticed a brown envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, he found photos of himself leaving school in the park, talking to Officer Rodriguez. A note accompanied the images. "Some truths cost too much." Claire Bennett immediately called Michael, her voice trembling with concern. "They know where we live, officer. They're watching my nephew." "I'll send a team right away," Michael replied, already signaling to Rachel. "Don't touch anything else. Keep the doors locked." The investigation took on a new sense of urgency. Rachel called an emergency meeting with her trusted team in the operations room. On the board, in addition to the photos of the victims, there was now a complex diagram showing the connections between Callahan and various public officials. "Janet Cooper has agreed to testify," Rachel announced. "She has documents proving that Fleming kept a separate file of each incident as collateral." "Collateral against Callahan?" asked one of the detectives. "Exactly. And I bet his death wasn't as natural as they'd have us believe." In court, Judge Gregory Pierce was analyzing the request for a search warrant for the Callahan mansion when he received a phone call. His face paled when he heard the voice on the other end. Minutes later, he denied the request, citing insufficient evidence. Melissa, who had copied the compromising files from her father's computer, struggled internally over what to do with the information. Over dinner, she observed Robert Callahan, the man she had always admired, now looking older and tired. "Dad," she began hesitantly, "I met a girl at school today. Sophie would be my age now, wouldn't she?" Callahan's cutlery clinked against his plate. "What are you talking about?" "Sophie Wilson, the girl who died in the accident 3 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Callahan stared at her daughter for long seconds before abruptly getting up from the table. At the police station, Rachel received another piece of the puzzle. A former mechanic at the Mercedes dealership revealed that he had repaired Callahan's car on the night of the Wilson accident, removing evidence of impact and replacing the damaged license plate. "We need protection for all these witnesses," Michael insisted. "Callahan is desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Or they become more dangerous," Rachel added, remembering Fleming's death. Lucas, now under constant police protection, spent his nights reminiscing about that fateful night 3 years ago. Every detail remained vivid in his memory. The sound of the impact, the screams, Sophie Wilson's face illuminated by the headlights seconds before the collision. Melissa, after much thought, made a decision. Using an anonymous email, she sent copies of the compromising files to Rachel Morrison. The message contained just one line: "Some truths need to come to light, no matter the cost." The investigation was about to enter its most dangerous phase. Rachel knew they needed to act quickly before more evidence disappeared or witnesses were silenced. Callahan's empire was beginning to show cracks, but its foundations were still deep and well protected. "The truth is like water," Michaels repeated Lucas's words as he reviewed the evidence for the 1,000th time. "And it's about to break through all barriers." In the evidence room of the Seattle police station, Rachel Morrison was analyzing the files sent anonymously. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through detailed spreadsheets of bribes, names of officials, and astronomical amounts. The complexity of the network of corruption built by Robert Callahan was greater than she had imagined. "We need federal protection," declared Michael Rodriguez, looking over Rachel's shoulder at the documents. "This goes far beyond Seattle. There are FBI people, federal judges, even a senator involved." "The problem is who we can trust," Rachel replied, massaging her temples. "Every new name we discover makes our circle of allies even smaller." At the Callahan mansion, Melissa found herself locked in her room, alternating between moments of guilt and determination. The weight of having betrayed her father fought against the certainty that she had done the right thing. Her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "We know what you did. Meet in 1 hour at Pike Place Market." Lucas Bennett tried to keep his school routine normal, but the worried looks from his teachers and the constant presence of plainclothes policemen made this impossible. During math class, he received a note from a classmate. "My father works for Callahan. He said your family should have taken the money." D.A. Hartford called an emergency meeting with Rachel and Michael. His office was different. Blinds closed, cell phones turned off, bug detector active. "Judge Pierce was found dead this morning," he announced. "Drug overdose. He left a letter confessing his involvement with Callahan." "Forced suicide," Rachel concluded. "Callahan is eliminating connections." "We need to act now," Michael insisted. "Every hour that passes is a witness at risk." At Pike Place Market, Melissa waited nervously, observing the movement of tourists and vendors. A middle-aged woman approached discreetly, taking a seat next to her. "I'm Karen Wilson," she said softly. "Amanda's sister." Melissa's heart raced. "How?" "I recognized your email address in the file metadata," Karen explained. "I work in IT. We need to talk about your father." At the police station, Janet Cooper provided more details about Callahan's operation. "He had a system for every type of problem," she explained. "Car accidents were just the tip of the iceberg. There were kickbacks in public contracts. Money laundering through charities even influenced peddling and court decisions." Rachel recorded every word, mentally constructing the case that would destroy Callahan's empire. An officer rushed into the room. "Detective, we need you. There's been an incident at the Bennett house." Michael's heart froze. He and Rachel ran to their cars, sirens blaring as they cut through Seattle traffic. Arriving at Roosevelt Avenue, they found Claire Bennett's house surrounded by police officers. The living room window was broken, but Lucas and his aunt were safe. "It was a warning," Claire explained, hugging her nephew. "They threw a rock with a message, 'Last chance.'" At Pike Place Market, the conversation between Melissa and Karen Wilson was interrupted by a phone call. It was Robert Callahan, his voice unrecognizable with fury. "Where are you? Come home immediately." "He found out," Melissa whispered, pale. "Come with me," Karen offered. "We have a safe place." At Callahan Enterprises, Robert Callahan looked out over the city from his penthouse window. His empire, built up over decades, was crumbling like a house of cards. His phone rang. It was his new lawyer. "Sir, the Securities and Exchange Commission has just frozen all your accounts. The FBI is on their way." Rachel and Michael were coordinating the biggest operation of their careers. Teams from the FBI, the Internal Revenue Service, and the District Attorney's Office were converging on strategic points in the city. Callahan's network was being methodically dismantled. "I just got a call from the Department of Justice," Hartford reported. "They want Lucas and Janet Cooper in immediate federal protection. Witnesses in cases of systemic corruption have top priority." Melissa, now under protection in the Wilson safe house, shared more details about her father's files. "He kept records of everything," she explained. "It was his insurance. If anyone tried to take him down, they would fall down with him." Night fell over Seattle as the first arrests began. Judges, businessmen, civil servants, all connected to Callahan's network. Rachel watched the monitors in the operations center, coordinating the teams. "Callahan isn't at the mansion or the office," an FBI agent reported. "We suspect he has an escape plan." Michael, protecting Lucas and Claire in a secure hotel, received constant updates. The boy, exhausted but determined, looked out of the 10th floor window. "Officer Rodriguez," he called softly, "do you think it's finally over?" "Almost, Lucas," Michael replied, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Thanks to your courage, a lot of people are going to get justice." Rachel received urgent information. Security cameras had captured Callahan entering his private hangar at King County Airport. "He's going to try to escape," she warned. The teams. "All units to the airport. Now." The final hunt for Robert Callahan was about to begin, and with it, the fate of one of the biggest corruption schemes in Seattle's history would be sealed. King County Airport was buzzing with activity as tactical teams took up strategic positions. Rachel Morrison coordinated the operation of the Mobile Command Center, watching the thermal images of the private hangar, where Robert Callahan had last been seen. "All the exits are covered," reported FBI Special Agent David Chen. "3 private aircraft are in the hangar, but only one is fueled and has a registered flight plan to Vancouver." "He's not going to get away," Rachel said, adjusting her bulletproof vest. "Not after everything we've discovered." Meanwhile, at the hotel where Lucas and his aunt were being sheltered, Michael Rodriguez was receiving an urgent call from Melissa Callahan. "Officer, my father has a bunker," she revealed, her voice trembling. "Under the main hangar. It was built during the 2018 refurbishment. It's not on any official plans." Michael immediately passed the information on to Rachel. "We need underground scanning equipment," she ordered, "and call the fire department's engineering team." Downtown, Janet Cooper was being escorted to a formal deposition when she noticed something strange, a black car following her. "Detective Parker," she alerted the officer driving, "I think we have company." Before they could react, the black car closed in on the vehicle, forcing it against the curb. 2 men in suits got out, pulling guns. "Last attempt to silence witnesses," muttered Parker, calling in reinforcements as he drew his own weapon. At the airport, the tactical teams moved methodically through the hangar. Rachel led a group down the east side while FBI agents covered the west. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with the tension in the air. "Movement in the upper office," whispered an agent over the radio. Rachel signaled to her team. Through the mezzanine windows, she could see shadows moving. The office door slowly opened, revealing Robert Callahan, his normally controlled features now marked by despair. "It's over, Callahan," Rachel declared through the megaphone. "The building is surrounded." An enigmatic smile crossed the businessman's face. "There's always a way out, Detective Morrison. Always." He raised a device in his hand, a detonator. "Evacuate the hangar," Rachel shouted, but it was too late. A controlled explosion ripped a hole in the floor, revealing the entrance to the secret bunker. Callahan disappeared through the opening, amid the confusion. In the hotel, Lucas watched the live coverage on television, his heart racing. "He's going to run away again," he muttered, tears in his eyes. "Like that night." "Not this time," Michael assured him, receiving constant updates on the radio. Downtown, the shootout between Callahan's men and the police had turned into a chase. Janet Cooper, sheltered in the back of the car, clutched a folder containing crucial documents. "These records need to get to the prosecutor's office," she insisted. Rachel and her team cautiously descended into the bunker. The space was surprisingly large, with several exits. "He planned this," an FBI agent commented. "There must be tunnels connecting to different points in the city." Melissa Still, in the safe house with Karen Wilson, was remotely accessing the Callahan Mansion's security system. "Got it," she exclaimed. "The bunker plans are on his personal server. 3 exits, one to the abandoned subway, another to a warehouse in the harbor, and the third." "Where to?" Karen asked, watching the girl's face turn pale. "To the old Prohibition smuggling tunnel system, exactly under the place where Amanda and Sophie were run over," Karen added, a shiver running down her spine. Rachel received the information and split up the teams. "He's trying to disperse us," she warned. "But knowing Callahan, he'll choose the most symbolic route." In the tunnel system, Robert Callahan moved with the familiarity of someone who knew the place well. His footsteps echoed off the centuries-old walls, mingling with the distant trickle of water. He came to a fork in the road and hesitated, his hands shaking as he consulted a map on his cell phone. Rachel, following her instinct, led her team through the tunnel that led to the site of the Hitandron. The beam of her flashlight revealed old graffiti and seepage on the walls. The air was heavy with decades of secrets. "Movement ahead," whispered an agent. In the hotel, Lucas suddenly stood up. "Officer Rodriguez, I need to be there." "Lucas, it's too dangerous," Michael protested. "That place, I dream about it every night. I know exactly where everything happened. I can help." After a brief hesitation, Michael made a phone call to Rachel. Minutes later, they were on their way to the scene with Lucas protected by a bulletproof vest. In the tunnel, Callahan reached a larger chamber. Through rusty grills in the ceiling, he could see the light from the street lamps. He was standing, exactly where his life had begun to fall apart 3 years earlier. "Robert Callahan!" Rachel's voice echoed through the chamber. "There's no way out." The businessman turned slowly, a gun in his hands. "There's always a way out, detective. There's always a deal to be made." "Not this time," a young voice sounded. Lucas emerged from the shadows, protected by Michael and other officers. "Not for what you did to Amanda and Sophie Wilson." Callahan stared at the boy, his mask of control finally breaking. You're just like your father." He didn't understand either that sometimes it's better to keep quiet. "My father understood perfectly," Lucas replied, his voice firm despite his fear. "He taught me that the truth always finds its way." The sound of more tactical teams arriving echoed through the tunnels. Callahan looked up through the bars at the street where he had destroyed 2 innocent lives. His hand with the gun trembled. "Put the gun down," Rachel ordered. "Don't make your situation any worse." For a moment it seemed that Callahan was considering his options. Then, in a sudden movement, he raised the gun. The echo of the shot reverberated through the tunnels, but it wasn't Callahan who fell. The echo of the shot was still reverberating through the tunnels when Rachel Morrison realized that Robert Callahan had fired at one of the old pipes, causing an explosion of steam that momentarily created a smoke screen. In the midst of the chaos, his silhouette disappeared down a side passage. "Protect the boy," shouted Rachel as her team quickly reorganized. Michael Rodriguez covered Lucas with his own body, leading him to a safer area of the tunnel. "He's heading for the exact spot," Lucas said breathlessly, his voice echoing off the damp walls. "To the point where Sophie and her mother—" "How do you know?" Michael asked, keeping the boy sheltered behind a concrete column. "Because that's where the tunnels converge. I studied the history of this place after the accident. It was a distribution point during Prohibition." Rachel, receiving the information on the radio, reorganized her teams. "All units converge on the Alpha Point. He's trying to reach the 5th Avenue exit." In the mobile command center, Melissa. Callahan worked frantically with the technicians, analyzing the old plans of the tunnels. "There's a main chamber," she explained, her fingers gliding over digitized maps. "It was used as a warehouse for smuggled liquor. It has 3 exits, but 2 of them collapsed in the 1960s. Karen Wilson, who stood next to the girl, noticed something in the files. "Wait, this mark here, that's exactly where Amanda and Sophie died," Melissa added, her voice breaking. "My father must have discovered these tunnels during the downtown revitalization works." In the tunnels, Callahan moved with the urgency of a cornered animal. His Italian shoes, now covered in mud, slipped on the uneven floor. The beam of his flashlight revealed old broken bottles and faded graffiti on the walls. Each step took him deeper into his own nightmare. Rachel and her team advanced methodically, guided by Melissa's information. The air was getting thicker and thicker, laden with decades of secrets and humidity. "Movement ahead," whispered one of the FBI agents. In the main chamber, Callahan found himself surrounded by concrete pillars that looked like silent sentinels of his crimes. Through a grill in the ceiling, he could see the exact spot where 3 years earlier he had destroyed 2 innocent lives with his Mercedes. "It's over, Dad," Melissa's voice echoed through the communication system Rachel had installed. "I've seen everything. The files, the payments, the threats. Why do all this?" Callahan looked up towards the bars as if he could see his daughter through them. "You don't understand, darling. I've built an empire. Every decision, every accident was necessary to protect what we built." "Protect?" Lucas's voice sounded clear in the darkness. The boy had managed to break free of Michael's protection, momentarily. "You destroyed families. Sophie was my age. She could be alive now, going to school, having friends. "Lucas, back off," Michael ordered, but the boy stood his ground. Callahan turned slowly, his gun shaking slightly. "You're just like your father, kid." He didn't understand either that some truths should remain buried. "My father understood perfectly," Lucas replied, his voice firm despite his obvious fear. "He died carrying that weight, but he taught me that the truth always finds its way." Rachel took advantage of the distraction to position her team strategically. The light from several flashlights converged on Callahan, creating a circle of clarity in the center of the dark chamber. "Robert Callahan," Rachel announced formally, "you are under arrest for the murder of Amanda and Sophie Wilson, obstruction of justice, act of corruption." "You don't understand," Callahan shouted, his facade of control finally crumbling. "I didn't want to." That night I'd been drinking. I was celebrating an important contract. When I saw it, it was too late. "Then why didn't you stop?" Lucas asked, tears streaming down his face. "Why didn't he help them?" "Because he's a coward," Karen Wilson's voice echoed over the public address system. "He'd rather build an empire on lies than face the consequences of his actions." Callahan looked at the gun in his hand, then at the railings above where the light from the street lamps created a checkered pattern on the damp ground. For a moment everyone could see not the powerful businessman, but a man broken by the weight of his own crimes. "Melissa," he called softly, "forgive me." The movement was too quick. Callahan raised the gun, but before he could press it against his own temple, Michael knocked him down with one precise movement. The gun slid across the soggy floor, stopping at Lucas's feet. "No," the boy said, stepping back. "He needs to face up to what he's done. As my father always said, some debts can only be paid with the truth." As the tactical teams handcuffed Callahan, Rachel watched the scene with a mixture of relief and sadness. Years of lies, death, and corruption were finally coming to an end, in the same tunnels that had witnessed the beginning of it all. On the surface, Melissa was waiting with Karen Wilson when the teams emerged with her father. Their gazes met briefly, no longer father and daughter, but two people connected by a web of choices and consequences. "You did the right thing," Karen said softly to Melissa. Lucas, emerging from the tunnels with Michael, looked at the exact spot where Sophie and Amanda Wilson had lost their lives. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers of a small makeshift memorial on the sidewalk. "It's over," Michael said, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "No," Lucas replied, watching the sunrise paint the Seattle sky with hopeful hues. "Now the truth can finally begin."